What's up, everybody? Welcome to Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness Podcast. My boy, Brandon DeCruz, and myself, Jeff Black. This week, episode 3, how to determine your maintenance calorie intake. But first, Brand, how you doing, man? I know you've been under the weather fighting all sorts of stuff. So what's been going on last week for you?
Yeah, man. Last week has been extremely busy. I will say that I did get myself under the weather. I don't know if it's just due to the seasons changing over here in the Northeast or the fact that I've literally worked myself into the ground. It could be a combination of both, but ultimately I have a gnarly sinus infection right now. So I apologize to anyone if my voice sounds a little bit crude, but still wanted to make it happen. We're going to be on here, rain or shine, sickness and in health. Jeff and I are going to be showing up for this podcast. So that is something that I made sure that was a commitment that both of us made to this podcast. So other than that, everything's been good. This has been honestly, I had mentioned on last podcast that I just recently opened up my roster again. And this has been one of the most progressive and productive weeks in terms of onboarding clients that I've had in quite some time. And I think it was because I had such an outstanding roster list in terms of like on or waiting clients, like a waiting list. And so everything's going great. I got a bunch of people onboarded this weekend because I literally could not leave my house. I mean, the minute I stepped outside, like my allergies were killing me, then I was sick. So I was like, listen, let me lock myself in my office. And all I did was programming. So really productive weekend. And other than that, looking forward to feeling better and seeing what's ahead for the week.
So you've seen the movie Alien, right?
I have, but it's been quite some time.
You remember the thing that like jumps out and sucks on their face? That's what it feels like during allergy season to me. It's just like your face is just getting pounded on.
I've never had it as bad as I do now. So I can definitely relate to all my clients that have had allergies over the years. I have a friend that growing up, he used to be hospitalized all the time for allergies. And it's not like peanut allergies, but just literally walking outside. He was that kid that used to have to get microdosed the injections for the allergy shots because they literally could not give him a dose strong enough within one injection. So they used to have him go every single day to get that minimum effective dose. And so I remember seeing him and his face would blow up and he'd have all these side effects. And I'd be like, looking at him like, oh, wow. I couldn't relate to where he was coming from, but I'll tell you, recently I have felt that. I feel for all you that are suffering with allergies, and let's just push through. Yeah, take on a hand, to say the least.
Well, dude, congratulations on your business books blowing back up again. You deserve it. So congrats there, man.
Appreciate that.
Let's see. Past weekend, I was in Atlanta with my girlfriend, enjoyed a few days off the grid. It was cool. She was there when I officially signed my contract with my editor for my book. It's the first time I've ever really bet on myself. Like business to me is easy because I by and large am betting on other individuals to get done what I'm looking to do with me. So it's completely different, the risk I take in business than personal. I'm like a shy guy about it. So it was kind of surreal to get that done. And then yesterday I got my second appointment with my hip surgeon. And dude, first thing she did when she walked in, she goes, "How long you had that floater in there?" And I said, "What?" So before that, they took like 8 x-rays, low back, the whole 9 yards. So when I broke my hip and hairline fractured it over the last 3.5 years, that piece is just broken off and is floating around in my hip. Oh, wow. So yeah. My girlfriend was on the phone with me and we clarified a few things, but I'm looking at 2 separate surgeries. They're going to have to pull the rod out of my femur, let it heal for 12 weeks. And then I will have to have a hip replacement with another rod put back in. So I'll be down for 24 to 30 weeks when I officially get that done. We're going to do a PRP injection tomorrow. And the goal is to get me to the stage next year. I will qualify somewhere and then you'll see me at Team U and Masters. And if I don't get my pro card or anything good, I might finish up in the Knoxville show, which will be in August, like a couple weeks later, because that would be where I started it all in 2006. So I thought maybe I'd end it there. Yeah, I thought maybe I'd end it there. It was poetic that I'm ending with the same surgery that started it all. Literally a rerodding, got that done when I was 8 years old. So you're looking at 33 years later, I'm coming full circle, 34.
Well, let's think about it like, hindsight's 20/20 first and foremost, but let's think about it in a positive way. Look at the advancements in technology and surgery between then and now. So it's like, this is going to be a game changer. I'm sure that we all have trauma from, I'll tell you from my own perspective, from surgeries we've had in the past. And at least you're able to kind of get a take 2 and get a much better surgeon, a much better procedure, and then with also a different outlook on life. Like think about how much you've grown in the last couple of years, let alone in the last 30.
Yeah, no, I mean, I that's the hardest part is like because I remember what that surgery was to what it is today. So I've just got to wrap my mind around it. But I've got a really good group of people around me who are going to help me through it. You know, girlfriend will come in town for it to help me for the first load, and then I've got an older son. I've got friends and family around, so I'll be
You
all
know,
good
if
and
you
take
need
care
me,
of
I'll be there.
it. I know, man. I'll let
I'll
you be
put you
my
on my
nurse.
back, my man. I got you.
Oh, that'd be some good pictures. At least we gotta be shirtless when we do it, so that way it would
Oh,
definitely be
absolutely.
funny.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's pretty much what my last 7 days have been. So all in all, good stuff. At least I know that it's ending. So there's like a sign of relief to it, almost like you know, I don't know. I think I was a little bit more tired than I thought. So it was cool
No.
to just know it ends.
Did it give you like a little bit of a second wind, especially going into this next competition season? Because I know we spoke last during your last prep, and it was by far, I don't want to say easiest, but it was your best approach to a prep, you know, over the years that you've been doing this. But do you feel like a little bit revitalized, like seeing this as like, no, I don't want to say the end point. I don't want to say it's the closing of a chapter, but it is something that's
Mhm.
signifying something big, man. And you have kind of like a deadline. Like, I got to get this done before this surgery. Do you feel like you're a little bit more motivated for the process of getting into a prep, of making this progression throughout this off season and then going into that?
Yeah, I'm going to drop a few pounds. I'm about 180. I'm going to try to get under 170 because she said for every pound I drop, it saves 8 pounds of pressure when I walk around and stand, and 4 pounds when I'm
That makes
seated.
sense.
So I do the PRP injection tomorrow, and then we just kind of wait and see. But I don't know if it motivated me anymore. Like you called it, prep last year wasn't really hard for me because I was doing all the steps after meals. And that was just a game changer for me as far as like ease and just the wear and tear on my body. So I think it's more check back with me once I start really rolling. Like this week, I
Absolutely.
check in with Jason and kind of get the ball going and get the honesty back in the program after doing 75 hard. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't think I've processed it all yet.
No,
It's where
absolutely.
I'm at.
I look forward to hearing about it because I know that, first of all, we're all in a constant state of evolution, but you're very self reflective, which I appreciate about you because I am the same way, but it also inspires me to do it even more so. So I look forward to seeing your progression both physically and mentally throughout this process. And I think that's the beautiful thing about having a close relationship with a, you know, someone you trust and that you respect, because you're able to not only have them see your growth and for them to acknowledge it, but you're able to see theirs as well.
Yeah. And you know, I was talking to my girlfriend about it last night. I never wanted to be like one of those people who retired and came back, retired, came back and all that shit. So it's kind of fitting that when this is done and I go underneath that blade, it's for sure done. Like, you know, that muscles will never come back the same way. The bone won't be right. And I know that. So it's kind of cool. I've spent 28 years, 29 years by the time I'm done with that identity. So I'm looking forward to the next identity and what I pour 28, 29 years of pure effort into. But I can look anyone in the face and say, I gave it my all. And I don't think many people can look themselves in the face and say that for that long a period, but I can look anybody in the face, say, no, I defied every odd all the time and I still finished the drill. So I'm at least
Absolutely.
happy about that. Before we get blabbing too much about all that, because that could be a whole episode. so, so last week, guys, we talked about calorie calculators, and we would encourage you all to check that podcast out because there was a lot of research that even I wasn't aware of, as Mr. Brandon educated me on last week, with just how really wonky, for lack of a better words, the studies were and how small of a population percentage in the errors, all that. So today we are going to talk about, we're going to have the conversation to be how to determine your maintenance calories. But I would encourage you also, and Brandon and I were talking about this, to make sure you guys check in to last week's episode so you guys can be in on it. So last week we discussed how prevalent it is for people to look towards online calorie calculators to determine how much they should be eating to reach their goals. You know, we dug into the weeds of the research to set the stage for how knowing what to do to help counter the fallacies they might give in terms of results. So today we're going to begin the conversation with energy balance. I know Brandon really wanted to kind of get on that. So be sure to go back to listen to last week, and then that should set the ground and the foundation for where we're going to roll on this one. So Brandon, hit us with a little bit about energy balance and what you're looking to determine and all that. And then let's get to the bantering, baby.
Absolutely, man. So, in order to change your body composition and improve your physique, the first fundamental component of your program that you need to account for is energy balance, as your state of energy balance is the key determinant of whether you will see progress or not. So, energy balance essentially refers to the energy you consume as well as the energy you expend. And what goal a client has will determine what state of energy balance we aim for. So that's why it's a really important component, because it is like, if you don't have a target or you don't have a goal, you have nothing to aim for. And that's, you really have to know the first step before we take a leap on the staircase, essentially. So when you consume more energy than you expend, you're in a state of positive energy balance, meaning your body will start to store the extra energy you've taken in and will put it in one of your storage sites. Now, the easiest place to store these excess calories is in adipose or fat tissue, which is why, honestly, if we look at the literature, the average American is gaining 1 to 2 pounds on average per year, according to the CDC. So,
dude, did you see though during COVID that millennials gained over 40 pounds during
so it went
Clinial?
up astronomically.
Yeah, it went up wildly.
When we look at population averages across all demographics, it is 1 to 2 pounds still. However, the last couple of years really has drastically, rocked some of these statistics, especially with depression, with lack of, even increased sedentary time. Like, for instance, before COVID, as of 2020, they had done a population-based report on Americans. The average American was doing something like 5,100 steps per day. I guarantee that when they do that again in 2022, it's going to be drastically lower than that. So
I agree.
So many people are literally like, to me, like, I'll get 5,000 steps walking around my place, like making a meal, because I'm so active. You know what I mean? But it's just like, we see these statistics, and it really kind of shows guys like us that we live a little bit of a different lifestyle. The fact that there are people that are in such different positions. So I always like to seek first understand and really see what the average person is doing, and then try to, reshift their mindset as well as their habits and perspective. But back to like energy balance, we see that the average American is gaining 1 to 2 pounds per year, but that's going to depend on what your calorie intake is made of and what your training stimulus is like, because it can also be, oftentimes it's easiest to store as fat tissue or as adipose tissue. But depending on exactly what you're eating, the macronutrient distribution that you use, the type of, intensity or volume of your training, it can also be stored as glycogen or as muscle tissue. Now, on the other side of the energy balance equation, when you consume less calories than you burn, that extra energy has to come from somewhere. So it'll come from our storage sites. It'll come from stored tissue. And what we want to do is we want to bias that from coming from fat tissue, because that's the process of burning body fat. So before we're able to get a client to their goal, we need to determine the total calorie intake they can maintain their current body weight and body composition at, so that we know what we're working with and what their maintenance calorie intake is. This way, we can either add calories to, create a surplus and help them gain muscle, or we can pull from that baseline amount to create a deficit, depending on whether their goal is to gain muscle or to lose body fat. So specifically on this episode, what we wanted to do was take the information that we provided you guys on the research behind calorie calculators and focus more on how we find our clients' maintenance calorie intakes and how we design their base plan diets. Because like we always say, this is something I'm always, promoting, is the fact that knowledge without application is useless. We need to be able to take the information from the research or information we've gleaned from our own experiences with ourselves, and then be able to apply it to other people, because that's the only way we can help other people. You could be, an educator, you could spout out all these statistics, and believe me, I love research. But the reason I love research is it helps me in my practice day to day. And that's the only reason I'm that interested in it, because people ask me all the time, how do you, have all these statistics in your head? How do you remember all these studies? Because I utilize them. And if you ask other guys about some of the statistics and some of the studies that they cite on, one of their Instagram posts, they'll never be able to tell you how much body fat the Amish have. I'll tell you all day the same statistics, because I know them, because it's something that I've utilized in practice. And that's ingrained into my lifestyle and into my business. So it's a big thing going from being someone that just has knowledge, has this information, which is great. I really respect a lot of the intellectuals within this space, especially within the evidence-based nutrition field, but a lot of them have no practical experience. So when we came together, Jeff and I, to do this podcast, it really was to bridge the gap between information and application for everyone out there.
Yeah, 100%. So, guys, we decided to break this up into 4 topics. So topic 1, how do we determine our clients' maintenance intake? I know we both have probably slightly different approaches. So I'm going to cover the Gen Pop one. Would you like me to go first, or would you like to kick this off?
Absolutely. I would love to hear what you do.
So here's how I kind of look at this with Gym Pop people. They're my target audience because of the gym I own. We just did an ad for Average Joe's dodgeball team and all that. But I, as a coach, I remember me and you talked for the first time on the phone. You were not doing Gym Pop people lifestyle.
I was doing minimal. I wouldn't say I was doing minimal. I wasn't really focusing on competitors and very more serious lifestyle
Yeah.
plans for sure.
And then I was like, dude, just help Mrs. Jones lose 10 pounds and you'll see how rewarding it is, But 8 out of 10 of them, when I usually get them, they're sick to like some degree. There's something going on. So this is where you need to like really know that gym pop people, they're very different on their habits, their outlooks, etc., than you are on your health and fitness. Meaning B and I are used to walking around and taking 5,000 steps to get a meal or two ready, but they're not really used to that. And they have different sleep patterns. They don't really understand food intake. What they really need is patience and education. And I always tell everybody, like you said, the education component that allows you to achieve mastery and expert status in this field. But what I usually have them do to kind of start for the first week is I'll have them do a food, a sleep, and an activity journal, just so I can kind of see, like, I'm like, hey, don't change the thing. Don't even act like you've hired me. Don't act like you paid $1 yet. Just what would you normally do on 7 days, top to bottom sleep? And then based on that, it's all lifestyle because you're kind of trying to understand where they're at. And then you have to let them know where they want to get to with their goals, which begins, you have to help them negotiate with themselves down the line. You're going with very, very small wins. So I use an Excel tracker to usually just be able to kind of just start watching what they're doing. It helps people become very self-aware. I refer to it as like a balanced diary almost. Like they get to see where they lose it on the weekends. But what I normally do is I always usually begin like at body weight times 10. And then I kind of will start them there because for the most part, they eat out more than what they really know. They don't really track their food really well or have a good understanding of all the oils that are in the food when they eat out. And then there's the alcohol component. You got girls who weigh 140 pounds, go out and do 3 drinks and a meal, and they took in 1,800 calories. And I'm like, well, that's why you're not losing weight, But I really have found with the gym pop people, I'll start them at body weight times 10 and kind of get them going, kind of get them detoxed. Usually in the beginning, they're just very much like, ooh, I'm not hungry. And then about 4 or 5 weeks in, they start getting hungrier. And then I start reversing up. And the goal is I usually will start most people in a deficit to kind of get the reins on it. And then depending upon where I'm going goal wise, I can shoot and adjust the calories and the activity accordingly using some kind of Excel tracker. Now, when it comes to competitors, usually you have a boatload of information to go off of. You can kind of take their pictures. That one's really easy. But for the gym pop, a lot of it's understanding their lifestyle, if they're insulin resistant, if they have thyroid issues, anything like that. So I usually go that approach when trying to understand their maintenance. And I would dare say, if I'm being honest, I always start everybody out in a deficit and then slowly work their way up and get them some small wins and a little momentum going. What about you?
Yeah, so you know what? I like that we take different approaches because I think that this could really benefit the audience because there's going to be, you and I both have tons of experience, thousands of clients, but we have different ways of looking at things. But I think we're looking at getting to the same place, but there's different roads to Rome. So really, when we discussed doing our first, concept episode on calorie calculators, the reason that I really was passionate about doing that, and the reason I got into that literature was because a lot of times when people are looking to determine their maintenance calorie intakes, they're going to automatically Google a generic calorie calculator and
Correct.
use that to tell them how much they should be eating. And they don't even think twice about it. And so that's why in last week's episode, which I'm going to refer everyone back over to, we covered a ton of reasons why this is an ineffective approach to determine your calorie intake due to how much research we have on the inaccuracies of these outdated estimation equations and
Correct.
how they don't take into account any of your personal characteristics, any of your history. And they also treat your metabolism and your total daily energy expenditure as a static number that doesn't change, when honestly, that couldn't be further from the truth. And this is something that we're going to do a whole month-long topic on metabolism because there's so many misconceptions within this industry,
Oh,
even from
yeah.
those that are educated on the space. I've heard even at seminars where people are talking about metabolic adaptation, and that's a hobby horse of mine. That's something I've dove in deeper than
And
most
they're
because
wrong.
and they're wrong. They're
Yeah.
spouting, statistics to fit their biases. They're telling people that their metabolisms are damaged or that they're broken or this, that, and the other. And we just don't have literature on that. We've never seen that as a case. So we're really going to dive in deeper with that. But I want you guys to realize this fundamental principle. The thing is, our total daily energy expenditure, which you guys can kind of think about synonymously with metabolism. A lot of times when people are thinking metabolism, they're thinking about the total amount of calories they burn per day, which is actually more adequately or accurately termed total daily energy expenditure. And that's constantly changing on a week to week basis, depending on the amount of activity we do, the food sources we select, the macronutrient composition that we use, for instance, with macronutrients, we're going to have a different thermic effect of feeding depending on which macronutrients we consume. And due to this fact, we're literally always in a state of flux. So the first thing I do when a new comes to me, I have them send me a food log or a food diary so I can do what I call a dietary assessment, as I need to know what they're eating and doing currently to see what would be the best course of action moving forward. And I do this in one of two manners. And really what I do is it's going to be based on the personality type of the client who's coming to me. And I'll decide which of the two methods I want them to utilize. So for instance, in the first case, if someone is quite consistent with their diet and there's someone that's a serious lifestyle client or a competitor, I'll have them send me a layout of their average day of eating, including all the meals and the times that those meals were consumed, all the snacks or, protein bars and things of that sort that they eat, and any and all calorie containing items, including like coffee that they have with cream and sugar, calorie containing beverages, supplements that contain calories. I'm having them lay out their entire day. Now, if someone comes to me and they tend to fluctuate or they don't really have a routine, so they fluctuate in terms of their daily intake, or they haven't even ever followed like a diet plan, or they've never really had anything consistently, what I'll do is I'll have them track 3 days worth of food in an app like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer. Usually I'm going to go with MyFitnessPal because I do prefer Chronometer for the accuracy point of view, but I do find that a lot of people get a little bit too fixated on some of the numbers and get confused and stuff. So off the bat, since I'm just getting them on an intake, I'm like, listen, go to something you feel comfortable with. If you've been using MyFitnessPal, by all means, utilize that. And I want you to send me each day's food log and calorie and macro totals. So I want to see, I'm getting 3 different days. So I'm seeing what their food variety is like. I'm seeing what preferences they kind of lean towards. And I'm also asking them questions within the intake, like what are some things that you prefer? And I'm trying to really get a good idea of not only their intake, but their preferences and habits. So I'm essentially what I'm looking for new clients to do is send me an account of the specific foods and amounts they eat on a daily basis, along with their weight, to see what level of intake they stay weight stable at, which then allows me to determine a more accurate baseline of what their actual total daily energy expenditure is, which is equivalent to what their maintenance calorie intake is. So a lot of times we speak about these terms, but people don't realize they're one and the same. If you're maintaining your weight at 3,000 calories, that's your total daily energy expenditure, meaning it's baseline. And you're in energy balance, meaning you're consuming 3,000 calories, but you're also burning 3,000 calories. And that's where a lot of people get caught up on these activity trackers in terms of calorie burning. If you are staying weight stable, I don't care if your Apple Watch tells you you're burning 5,000 calories per day. If you're tracking your food and you're eating 3,000, you are not burning more than that, because this is physics. I understand not everything comes down to numbers. When it comes down to physics, the first law of thermodynamics is energy cannot be created nor destroyed. You know what I mean? So we cannot just take and say we're burning 5,000 calories per day through our Apple Watch, but we're not losing weight. That's just not how energy balance works. So now here's the thing. The reason that we went over the calorie calculators is because, or one of the reasons that I got into it, was when I first started looking into the research on these devices, I couldn't believe how far off they were from some of these studies. And so what I did at that point was I would take and I would set up a client and I would have them do this food log, and I would see where they're maintaining their energy intake at and their body weight. And then I would take all their anthropometrics, meaning their height, their weight, their body fat, and all the other, their gender, things of that sort. And I would put into popular calorie calculators. And more times than not, I saw that there was a difference of at least a few hundred calories in either direction, if not more, which may not seem like a big deal. So I'll tell you, I went over the research last week, but I've seen this in experience dozens, if not hundreds of times with clients. And a lot of people, they're not thinking, I got a lot of feedback. Well, if it's just a baseline, if it's a rough estimation, is it a big deal? A lot of people don't think this is a big deal, but here's the thing: that difference of 300, 400, 500 calories could be the difference between seeing results within the first few weeks of a program, or missing the mark and delaying a client's progress. So at this point, I haven't used a calorie calculator in years because I trust my ability to read a client's feedback and make assessments based on the individual client's info more than I do on an algorithm or an AI-based, calculator. So at this point, I'm doing things I'm getting their intake. I'm really getting to know them and their habits, as well as tracking their body weight over time, and then seeing what intake are they able to maintain at, and what can we build them to and get them weight stable at.
I agree. I like how we have different approaches to it. I will say this, though. I want to ask your question. You think the 80-20 Pareto principle applies when you're looking at the majority of Gen Pop, which I tell a lot of coaches, I think a lot of coaches are looking at getting competitors or very healthy life, people like that, like active But the majority of where the biggest, the blue ocean is, quote unquote, is if you walk through a mall or a grocery store. Those are the people who need your help and education. If I were to pull 100 of those people, I would dare say 20 of them would nail it really good out of the gate. Like they gave you the right answers, they gave you the right expectations about, hey, Brandon, like a G Flux model would work for me, or no, Brandon, a G Flux model would not work for me, etc. And then I think you have the other 80%, it's stop and go, stop and go, stop and go, stop and go until like another 20% breaks through. What would you say about that?
When it comes down to the 80-20% principle, I think I'm going to kind of surprise you with this answer. I don't think that applies. I think it applies in one
Ooh,
aspect.
go
So
for it.
80-20, a lot of people will say that within nutrition. It sounds sexy. They'll say, all you have to do is nail it 80% of the time. Here's the thing. If you nail your nutrition 80% of the time, that 20% can outweigh that 80%. And this is, I'm going to break it down and extrapolate it for you. When we look at energy intake, if you're only hitting that 80% of the time, so say we're trying to get you at maintenance intake, and you're eating 3,000 calories per day 80% of the time, but 20% of the time, so say, 1.5 to 2 days per week, you are eating 6,000 calories. So you're doubling your calorie intake. And we see that within literature. And I'm sure you see that within your own clients where they eat a lot more on the weekends. They binge drink.
100%. Yep.
That is going to outweigh, because if we do a calorie calculation throughout the course of the week, those doubled up days, that 80% is not making up for that 20% because their 20% was that far out. Now, here's where the 80-20% rule I do think applies. When you have constructed a diet and you are following, you have a set energy balance or you have a set energy intake, and you are nailing that with 80% whole food sources, quality food sources, nutrient-rich food sources that keep you satiated, that hit your micronutrient needs, that fill in all the big rocks. They're hitting complete protein sources. They're making sure that you're adequately stimulating muscle protein synthesis. They're helping with aiding with recovery, satiation, hunger management, all that stuff. If you take 20% of those, say you get 3,000 calories per day and you take 400 to 600 calories per day and you allocate them towards things that you like a little bit more than others, maybe a little bit more flexible food sources, but throughout the course of the week, you're still in line with what your energy needs are. That's where 80-20% I think applies. But if you're 20%, we have to look at that from, it's not just these numbers like, oh, 20% of the week I do whatever I want. If you're doing whatever you want to the point that it's so far outside of what your body needs, your body doesn't care that's only 20% of the week because you've done that much damage during that time period.
I agree with you. And that's why I think, though, when you get, say, 100 people, 20% will nail it out of the gate and you're able to really run the offense that you set up for them. And I think, like you said, the other 80% really struggle with that 80-20 because they think I do good Monday through Friday. And then Friday night begins the guacamole and margaritas and it doesn't stop till Sunday brunch. And I'm like, well, you just completely dug out of everything you did good for 4 days, 5 days of the week. And that's where you see a lot of the yo-yo dieters and a lot of them get very frustrated. When we talked about this topic as a whole was based on those people because, that was something that you and I talked about that was, I guess, as you said, maybe like something that not many people were aware of, the yo-yo dieters and being very off on their calorie calculators and then not understanding why they aren't getting results, etc., because of just how flawed the research was in them and how inaccurate they are.
Now, here's the thing. I do want to get this across to people because when I have clients track, it's more from a habitual standpoint. They don't have to tell me, hey, listen, I'm getting 3,000 calories. A lot of times they're sending me these totals of what they think they eat, and I'm doing the calculation on the back end. And believe me, I've tracked. I'm very numbers oriented. I come from a statistics background. I did, data analysis with a corporate job. So I'm a little bit more experienced, I want to say, with that. And I'm a little bit more anal, but I don't impress that upon my clients because it doesn't matter. If you are off 100% of the time by 20%, it doesn't matter. You know why? Because you are consistently off. So say, for instance, I had a client, and this is a funny story. I had two clients. They lived in a household together. It was a boyfriend and girlfriend, and their scale was off, and they didn't know. And so I had titrated. One was in a dieting phase, so I was noticing he was having a harder time, and one was in a reverse diet. And so both of their scales were off. They were utilizing the same scale. And so initially, the first couple of weeks, I'm like, man, I'm dropping this guy into a deficit. He's not really responding. I thought he just had an adaptive metabolism. And I knew he was experienced with tracking. I've been working with him for quite some time. It was literally just a scale. And it took them about 4 to 5 weeks to really notice because in terms of, he was not understanding like how he wasn't responding because we had done dieting phases in the past. And he's like, you've made a lot of these similar pulls before and my body responded. Do you think something's wrong? I'm looking at his blood work and there's no key indicators. And so at one point he started getting signs that he was in a deficit. We knew that for sure. You know what I mean? And so then his weight started coming off. But what had happened was he was using the scale that he had at his work. He was preparing a lot of his meals at work. So now it wasn't the same scale. Now, when he went back home, he decided to just test them out back and forth, and there were a couple 100 grams off. So he was eating a couple 100 grams more of food,
Yeah.
per day as we add up throughout the course of the day. But when he was stationed, because he was in the military, when he was on base in his office, he was on point and he was starting to lose weight and he was having signs of a deficit. Where initially I was asking him for signs like, listen, do you feel a little bit lower in energy? He felt fully fueled, and I was dropping his calories. I'm not seeing weight moving. I'm asking him different biofeedback markers, but it was because the scale was off. So it's about being consistent. I'm not saying, in that case, this was, you know, unfortunately a technology error, but it's not about being 100%. I don't need anyone perfect in anything because we really can't be. With the FDA guidelines and rules, with restaurants, things of that sort, we're never going to be 100% accurate on our calorie counts. But if you can be consistent over time, that's what's going to make you all the difference, because it doesn't matter if you're a couple grams off here or there, but if you're consistently off a couple grams here or there throughout the course of an entire week, then when I make adjustments, or when we make adjustments to a plan, it's based off of their consistent inaccuracy. It's not
Correct.
about being 100% perfect. It's about being consistent.
I agree with you 100%. The fact that you extrapolated in a sentence earlier really impressed me. I don't think that's ever been done on a health and fitness podcast. Good for you for sliding that in. I think we kind of rounded that one up pretty good. You want to head to topic 2, top priorities of nutrition when designing a diet. So there is a hierarchy when you're doing this. So I'm going to let you take this one first and roll with it.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to cover the hierarchy, but the first thing I want to do is I get a lot of questions regarding nutrition, and I find that often when people come to me, there's a lot of confusion. And I think this comes from the fact that there's a lot of debate within our industry whether we should be focusing on food quantity or food quality. And for a lot of people who come to me, I find that they're confused by the many arguments that they hear out there about what aspect of nutrition they should really be prioritizing.
Oh,
So
you
we
mean
have
like a Pop-Tart's the same as fucking fruit argument? There you go. Oh, yeah.
No, exactly. So think about it. We have proponents of the if it fits your macros crowd, and they're yelling that it's only calories that matter. And then on the opposite side, we have those in, say, like the carnivore crowd or the keto crowd that are saying, hey, eat as much red meat and butter and things and fat sources as you want, and you can do that and get away with it without counting calories because they're high quality food sources. Now, when it comes to any topic within fitness, especially something that's diet or nutrition related, I like to see things from a hierarchical perspective, where I take the most important principles and place those as my high priority principles. And I work on those with clients first, because my goal is to build a foundation. And then I take each one in a stepwise fashion in terms of my programming. So my stance on nutrition is that we need to consider both quantity and quality. There should never be these arguments. It happens the same thing within training, where we have people yelling on one side that it's only about volume, and the other one's only about intensity. Without pairing the two, you have nothing. So without considering quantity of your food and your quality, you will not have the best soup, essentially, for lack of a better analogy, but you will never have the best concoction for what your goal is. And, for me, and I'm sure this is the case with you as well, the majority of people that come to me have the goal of improving their body composition. And generally that comes down to losing body fat. That's what they come to me for. That's their initial goal off the bat.
Mhm.
So we need to create an energy deficit to do so. So this is where quantity comes into play. I could never tell a client it's only about food quality if their goal is to lose body fat, because we have to create an energy deficit. We have to, respect energy balance. And so quantity is going to come into play. But here's the thing. How we construct that deficit in terms of the macronutrient composition and the food quality will determine whether the weight the client loses, comes primarily from fat tissue, which is what we want, or if it comes from muscle tissue. So we want to focus on predominantly losing fat mass and maintaining or even building muscle tissue during the
Right.
process, so we can actually improve their body composition as a whole. So this is where quality comes into play, as the quantity of your food will control whether you see your weight go up or down on the scale, but your quality of your food will determine the quality of the weight you lose or gain. So the first thing I'm prioritizing when I'm looking to creating a program is total energy intake. We got to get the numbers first. We got to look quantitative, and then we look qualitatively. So I start by analyzing how many how many calories a client will need in order to change their physiques and get to the body comp and health related goals. And once I have determined, or once I have the total quantity determined, I'm then going to focus on the quality of those calories, which comes down to the macronutrient composition of the diet, as your calorie intake will determine your body weight, but your macronutrient intake and the composition of those macronutrients will determine your body composition. And then from there, the food quality and the micronutrient intake will determine your health. So we have all these different levels of priorities.
So are you telling people to eat more organic and go in Mediterranean? Because that's what I do. I'm like organic as much as you can afford. And then I give them I'm like, because I try to teach my clients a lifestyle, like how to pick and understand food. So I do more of a grocery list option and then build out some samples. So I was curious. First, when you talk about quality, most people immediately go organic, non-organic. So you're saying that you don't really mess that too much.
So honestly, you're going to be surprised about this. When we look at most of research on organic foods, it doesn't confer any health benefit to non-organic foods. And even they did a review, a meta-analysis on the Dirty Dozen. So this is where everyone that's an organic foods consumer or buyer, they're really big on the Dirty Dozen. They always say, you'll hear people within this space, they say, if you're going to get, or if you're only going to buy certain items that are organic, make sure they're the ones on the Dirty Dozen, because they're the most likely to be filled with pesticides and pollutants and things of that sort. We know that. And so they actually did a meta-analysis a few years ago, and this changed my mind because, Jeff, I'll tell you, I was making myself broke going to Whole Foods and Trader Joe's.
You mean a whole paycheck?
Yeah, exactly. Now, here's the thing. I really got into this literature for myself, but also because I was having clients that I did recommend. I was that person that I recommended organic, and there's nothing wrong by that if your clientele can afford that. But I never want one of my clients to not consume vegetables or not consume produce or fruit because they couldn't afford the organic version. And so with that, I started looking into literature. There actually is, the Dirty Dozen has been disproven scientifically multiple times over. And so when they look at it, the amount of pollutants and pesticides and GMOs and things of that sort that are actually in the Dirty Dozen, you would have to eat an astronomical amount for it to accumulate to anything that would cause a statistically significant effect on your health. And honestly, in all the studies that they had, they don't see a big difference between the two. We even see that when looking at grass-fed versus grain-fed beef, that despite the fact that grass-fed beef has a little bit better of a omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid composition, it's really not that drastically different. So it really comes down to, with my clientele, the first thing I'm doing is I'm trying to meet them where they're at. So if they can't afford that, if they want to buy organic, by all means, if you feel more comfortable, I'll tell you personally, I bought all my fruit organic. And the reason for that, it's not because it confers a better health benefit, but it tastes better to me. And I
agree with that.
It's going to make me eat
100%.
more. Mm-hmm. And so I tell clients, listen, you have the option. If you are someone that you want to invest a little bit more into your health, I do. I personally want to, and I eat a ton of fruit. And the fact that it tastes better, it motivates me to eat more of it. So I'm going to spring first paying double for my fruit than I am, for organic fruit than I am non-organic. But if the limitation's your budget, I just want to make sure that you get it, even if it's frozen. You know what I mean? Actually, frozen vegetables confer some actually added benefits to regular, store, just regularly stored vegetables.
Same with frozen blueberries as well.
Yeah, because they're able to essentially, their flash freezing is able to hold in the nutrients for a longer period of time. So when it comes down to it, I'm looking at numbers first, then I'm looking at quality. I'm having suggestions. So I do what's called a structured flexible meal plan. So with that, I'm going to be giving food options per meal, what I suggest to a client, as well as the macros. Then they're going to have a food list that I build out for them, within their program, that they can also make swaps from within categories. Correct. So if meal one is 40 grams of protein from a lean protein source, I'm going to provide 2 or 3 options. Then they're going to have additional options in case they're traveling, or in case they don't have access to it, or in case they just want to change it. So there's going to be my top 3 suggestions, 2 to 3 suggestions based on quality, and then they're going to have some alternatives.
Yeah.
So the next thing I do, we're looking at total calorie intake. So we got that dialed in. The next thing I'm going to dial in is the macronutrient split, which, I'm going to prioritize protein first, and then I'm going to distribute the rest of their calories towards energy substrates, meaning either carbs or fats, based on a number of factors, like individual factors, such as the client's activity levels, their preferences, their training volume and frequency or intensity, their level of insulin sensitivity, among many other factors. So really, the only thing that I'm really dead set on is I'm always setting protein first. I'm making sure that it's filled with high quality proteins, meaning with a complete spectrum of amino acids to fully stimulate muscle protein synthesis. I'm going to make sure that they're nailing their total protein intake first. Then I'm looking at protein distribution. So I'm aiming for at least 3 to 4 servings. because that's what we see in the literature to be the most ideal. Some people I have eating 6 meals per day, but I'm at least getting 3 to 4 servings of a quality protein per day. And then I'm looking at protein type, which is the quality of protein.
I agree with you there. I think that that's the biggest thing when you're looking at a client. You have to assess like one, gut health, two, their lifestyle, three, insulin sensitivity, things like that. Because if you go too high on the carbs, you're just going to create more of a shitstorm for the person. So I agree with that. Now, do you find you do like more of a say protein? Because you're looking at like I found women do really well like setting protein about 0.8 and then kind of working your way up depending upon the feedback. And men about 1.0 grams per body weight. Do you kind of follow those rules of thumb, or do you just establish calories and then say 40% protein, 30% show, 30% fat, etc.?
No, I don't do percentages. I'll tell you why. The reason I don't do percentages is because it would actually deteriorate their protein intake throughout the course of a diet. So say I start someone at maintenance and I have them at 30% protein intake and they're eating 2,000 calories. That's give or take 650 to 700 calories from protein. But if their intake needs to get to 1,500 calories, their calorie allotment from protein just went from 700 to 500. So you've just lowered protein during a deficit, which is the time in which you should probably be most inclined to raise protein. You know what I mean? So I generally follow the guidelines. I use all kilograms because that's really what the research is based in. And I also work with a lot of international clients. I'm looking at generally for most people, lowest I'm going is 1.8 grams per kilogram. But generally it's 2.2 as a baseline, which would be 1 gram per pound. So that golden rule. And then up to 3.5 grams per kilogram in dieting cases to really help preserve muscle mass, especially in a catabolic state like a deficit.
I agree with you. I think you got to kick that protein up. The only thing I've seen is you'll see a lot of women have a hard time once you start really flying that protein up as far as getting that source in. What are some suggestions? Because I know we're going to have women who are listening and say they struggle with protein. How do you tell them to go about that? Do you spread it out over more meals? Do you just kind of have different options? I'm curious what you do, because I'm kind of like, hey, you might have to add like a little sprinkle of an extra ounce of meat here and some things like that. But by and large, that's usually the biggest struggle, especially with female clientele.
So with females, I first start with I'm increasing their meal frequency. So generally when a female comes to me, she's eating 2 or 3 meals per day. So that's an easy win. I could literally just get an extra protein feeding. And even if it's a time in which they say that because I'm asking subjectively, when are you most hungry? And some people it's in the morning, some people it's in the evening. Some women will just naturally skip breakfast and they're stressed, they're running throughout their day. I say, listen, can we get a protein, whether it be a shake, or can we do a Greek yogurt in the morning, some source of quality protein, at least to get 25 to 30 grams in. That's an additional 30 grams per day. So I've already bumped them up a good percentage. Another thing that I'll utilize is, in addition to increased frequency, is sometimes I'll do protein variety. And what I mean by that is I'll pair 2 different protein sources together within a meal. And the reason for that is there's something called sensory specific satiety. And so sensory specific satiety refers to the concept that when you eat the same food source, you'll generally get tired of it. So think about it like this, Jeff. When you go, this is my best example. When you go out to a restaurant and you have a big steak, something that's heavy protein, you have steak and potato, you're completely full, right? And so your stuff, you don't want any more of that steak. Maybe you had an 8 or 10 ounce ribeye or even something lean like a sirloin, and you're completely full. If someone comes around with dessert, do you usually have room for dessert?
Well, me, I always have room for dessert, Brandon.
But did you have room for another steak?
No, hell no.
The reason for that, not only because protein satiating, but it's also because of sensory specific satiety. So what that refers to is when you eat the same, or if you eat the same thing for an elongated period of time within a meal, you will lose your you will get satiated from that specific flavor and from those nutrients, from the protein, from, say it's a salty protein dish. Now, if someone was to take and bring you a different flavor, and they actually utilize this within eating contests. So for instance, there was a show called Man versus Food. And I know about this because they used to film nearby where I lived. And so he did this ice cream kitchen sink challenge. And so what it was like a 15-pound bucket of ice cream. It looked delicious. And now think about it. Like if anyone's going to eat something in excess, like ice cream, I mean, that would be like one of the number one things to be able to get down. So the guy, Adam Richter, which was the star of the show, he gets about halfway through and the guy honestly looks like he's going to throw up. And at that point, he did something that completely surprised me. And so he brings over the waitress and he orders a large platter of crispy, salty French fries. And I'm thinking to myself, they bring it out to him. He starts eating that. And with every bite, he took a scoop of ice cream and a French fry. And I'm thinking, if he's full, why is he eating more? It's due to sensory specific satiety. When your brain works in getting satiated from the same nutrient. Because think about it, in ancestral times, evolutionarily, we would have eaten until we were satiated based off one food source. But if we saw something else, it has different nutrients, it has a different profile. So say that we tracked down an animal and we killed and got all our protein, but then there was berries alongside. We'd be able to eat more of those berries, but we probably would get our full on the protein and not really want more of it. It's offering a different nutrient profile and also a different flavor spectrum that you're not as tired of. So with that, I try to utilize that type of mentality or type of approach within protein. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll combine two different protein sources with different flavors with my female clients or even my male clients. I'll have them take maybe, half of their, say we're aiming for 40 grams of protein within a meal, and they're completely satiated. They can't eat anymore. If I was just to give them, say that they're getting filled 30 grams out of those 40 grams for a meal. And so they couldn't eat any more of chicken breast. But how about if I took and I had them utilize chicken breast for 20 grams, and then I put a scoop of protein, or I put a protein bar, or I put Greek yogurt with, some protein powder or something else to bump that up without really increasing their fullness and also giving them a different flavor spectrum that they look forward to. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll either utilize it as an additional meal. So I'll utilize like a protein pudding or something of that sort to just have something that they look forward to, or I'll have them do a protein shake or a protein ice cream, or I'll add it to an existing meal.
Yeah, no, I like that approach. So there's a really good book. I liked how you talk about, you get ladies to eat more consistently. There's a book called Your Genius Body, and he talks a lot about a lot of the problem he thinks is not so much a hyperglycemia problem, but more of a hypoglycemia problem where, the blood sugar is bottoming out. There's a cortisol response. And I agree with that 100% with women, because you see a lot of, like, if you put them on a 24-hour monitor, like Varier like that, you will watch where it will just bottom out and then it will kick back up and bottom out, kick back up. And it's hard for a person to lose weight like that because a lot of women get hit hormonally, especially sex hormone wise, with cortisol spikes and dumps and things like that. So I like that you bring that approach up, because I don't think a lot of coaches think about that. They're like, here's your macros, eat how you want, and just kind of walk away from it. I'm like, you got to provide structure or you're creating other problems for them down the road. And it's a compound shitstorm you're going to try to get your way out of.
And I know you want to discuss this. We're not going to go down this rabbit hole because I know you've texted me that you want to discuss intermittent fasting, but I'm going to touch on this real quick and I'm going to move on to my next point. Because guys, Jeff is on me to do a deep dive into uncovering intermittent fasting. And we're going to do that for you guys. But I just want to touch on this. We see in the literature, and I'll also tell you with my personal experience, there's a lot of females out there that think intermittent fasting is good for them because they think they're going to burn fat. But due to cortisol patternings and due to their stress response, it actually is inferior in women. Not saying that women are inferior. What I'm saying is it's a suboptimal approach for women. So really what I try to do is when I have women come to me and they're utilizing a 16-8 approach, but they're having lack of energy or lack of movement early in the day, I'm trying to at least get a protein feeding. Even if they don't really have hunger because their appetite entrainment has kind of gotten used to that 8-hour window, I'm just trying to extend that out a little bit more. And I'm really trying to get women into this state of, I speak about this state of abundance, especially with energy flux. I'm trying to have them look at food as fuel rather than as something that they have to avoid. So that is something we'll dive in deep, but that is one other thing that a lot of women that come to me that have been intermittent fasting, I'm literally just trying to get them additional protein feeding. I'm trying to get them more comfortable with eating more and realizing it's not going to be it's not going to cause you to gain fat, or it's not going to have negative impacts on your body composition, especially when it comes down to protein, because we see that protein is so hard to store as body fat. But from like the hierarchical perspective, I don't want to miss out on this. The next thing I'm looking at is micronutrients. And this is something that you and I are very passionate about.
Yeah, that's our topic 3. This is where we're getting into like the other nuances.
This is still in the hierarchy though, because I'm going through total energy intake, macronutrients, micronutrients. Is the next part of the pie. So with micronutrients, we have to realize that nearly every process in the body relies on some type of vitamin or mineral. So ensuring that we're getting adequate amounts and quantities of micros in the body goes a long way towards ensuring these processes are running optimally. So we need micronutrients to act as cofactors for so many important processes, including the creation of ATP, which is our energy currency. So just to create energy, we need cofactors and we need micronutrients. We need it for the creation of hormones, as well as the conversion of hormones from their inactive form to their active form, and then many others. And within micronutrients, we also have to consider fiber. So with my diets, when I'm constructing diets, I'm making sure that I'm aiming to have clients getting in a sufficient amount of fiber to support digestive health and function, satiety and fullness, and clearance of things like cholesterol. Because I do see a lot of people that come to me that have high levels of cholesterol, total cholesterol, have high trigs, and they have literally no fiber in their diet. They're not having any cruciferous vegetables, any fibrous vegetables,
100%.
no fibrous fruit sources. And it's like, that's an easy win where I'm able to clean up their blood work within 4 to 6 weeks just by adding those things in without having to look at, the statin that their doctor's suggesting or any of those other alternative medicine practices that don't have great efficacy. Because when we really look at statins, it's about a 3% decrease. But, we'll cover that another day.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I like that setup because I look at micronutrients as the foundation to your house. They're also very heavily required for like HRV. So a lot of people who have terrible HRV numbers, when you use an app like Chronometer, you can start, which I like because it tracks the minerals, vitamins. Now it's not 100% spot on, but it starts giving clients an idea of where to go. And I'll be honest. I'm starting to go down this like really weird hole about iron overload and copper deficiency, which I'm like on this like real deep kick about. And I've been digging in the weeds and the research on this. Dude, there are people like taking 75 milligrams of copper, 100 milligrams copper. Yeah. And they're getting better because it's an iron overload problem. That's just a topic I'd like to dig into because I actually have someone who'd be willing to come on our podcast as a guest. But the research and some of the stuff I'd have to point you in the direction of. I'll be filling your text thread up. But I really think a lot of the issues for a lot of people is just the Western diet invaded them for so long. It got rid of the micronutrients and vitamins. And then they have like this house on a literally shitty shack of a foundation that they're trying to survive on. It's like having a
4-bedroom house on a 2-bedroom foundation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where people overlook micronutrients. And that's why I'm not a big fan of the if it fits your macros crowd, because it's such an emphasis on macros where we're neglecting that micronutrient composition. And within micros, we also have to consider hydration. And when I speak about hydration, this is something I'm really big with clients on, because everyone thinks about hydration. They only think about their fluid intake. They only think about water. But hydration is not only water, but it's also, meaning you have an adequate amount of fluids in conjunction with electrolytes like your sodium, like your potassium, and like your magnesium. And we see that just a 1 to 2% decrease in hydration can have negative and drastic effects on body composition and training performance. So that's another thing. I'm really focused on the water. That's something I have my clients track. I want to know their water intake. I'm having them measure out their sodium per meal. So it's like I'm trying to dial all these things in. These are all levers that I'm pulling. So that's where we have the hierarchy of nutrition. But within that, I know I'm going to get questions about this because this is a topic that I've covered in depth on other podcasts, is meal and nutrient timing. So we have to realize that when it comes to nutrition, calories, macros, food composition, and your micronutrients are the most important from a nutritional hierarchy perspective. But how and when you time your ingestion of these nutrients can optimize the results you get from the exact same calorie and macronutrient intake, as when you eat can influence how those nutrients get used and partitioned, as well as what tissues they get stored in, whether that be muscle or fat tissue. And so this is where your meal timing and nutrient timing comes into play. And then the last rung on the hierarchy is supplement intake. And this is probably where a lot of people have their biggest interest. And I'll tell you, I know that for a fact because my profession for a long time was in the supplement industry. But supplements are something I consider part of the nutrition plan if they aid in supplementing the diet in areas a client is lacking and can't get in through whole foods. And that's where we really start diving into their micronutrient intake and their deficiencies. For instance, like I'm sure you can attest to this the same. The biggest common deficiencies I see in clients coming to me: vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, selenium, iodine, so omega-3s. So within some of those, I'm hitting that from a nutritional perspective. I'm adding in iodized salt. I'm adding in different, spinach, things of that sort to hit those micronutrient intakes. But on other things like vitamin D that we're really not getting sufficient amounts from any whole foods, that's where I'm looking to supplement.
Yeah, I actually think the number one micronutrient that most, like everyone should be getting that is the least fortified, you see people really struggle with, is magnesium. Just because the way it burns through with stress and stuff like that. Usually put people on a form of magnesium glycinate I like to do because the literature shows it helps soothe the nervous system a little bit. You can help improve sleep like that. But I think you're right on the money. When you start looking at these like low-hanging fruit things, a lot of people aren't even doing them. And then that's how you can really kind of, kickstart results. Like, once you kind of like get the liver going, because a lot of the thyroid conversion, you kind of get the adrenals kicked up with the micronutrient vitamins. People almost feel like it's live and they're like running again. So I agree with that approach. Do we have anything else we want to cover there? I know I would like to touch on this. a lot of people like in the space now, I've kind of gotten away from all the over supplementation. I will just kind of do basics and then start plugging in. Now, sans, if there's like a gut health, like the person's got SIBO or something like that, you have to dead up treat. But for the most part, man, I try to start really basic and just complement my way in with stuff and then go from there. And then I think that covers that on the supplement side. I do have to pass you this book, Brandon, though, talking about why you shouldn't take vitamin D. I think you'd be blown away because it all goes back to the copper iron overload stuff. It's so wild.
I'll
It's actually vitamin
it
A, the vitamin A deficiency. And Aaron, who's on my team, turned me on to it. It's a guy named Morley Robbins. So he has like a data background. So he used to, for a long time, do hospitals, and he would go look at like the populations and then based upon the data, understand how the hospitals needed to be rigged. And he started getting into the research and started understanding it was more of an iron overload issue, which makes sense because when you get a lot of guys who jump on TRT when they're in their 40s, no matter what, they get hematocrit where, you know, they're the iron overload and then their red blood cells and everything's getting thick and they're needing to do bloodletting. But since I started watching my iron these last few weeks, dude, and started upping my copper to like 8 milligrams to start, I feel night and day difference.
Now,
Like,
what are you doing to deplete iron? Are you using like IP6 to help with
nope,
chelation, or are you just decreasing the amount of red meat in your diet? You're decreasing vitamin
correct,
C intake so that you don't have
correct.
as much iron absorption. Maybe utilizing calcium within meals containing iron because it blocks absorption. A lot of
Same
people
with
don't think
coffee
about those
too. You
things.
can do coffee, you know,
Yes, you
help
can
block
with
it as well.
the tannins
Mm-hmm.
in coffee and tea. And
Yep,
so a lot of people don't realize that. I have a lot of people that come to me and they say, "Do I have to go, lead blood because I have high hematocrit and hemoglobin?" And what they don't realize, that's a physiological response from TRT. That's really, if you look into literature on that, there is no link between cardiovascular disease and high hematology from testosterone replacement therapy. That's the first thing.
correct.
Second of all, if you have a condition in which you weren't on hormone replacement and you were over synthesizing red blood cells and had high hematocrit and hemoglobin as a response, then you would want to utilize some of these interventions. But a lot of times we have rebound erythropoiesis, which means the creation of new red blood cells when someone bloodleds. So they'll go and they'll give a donation and they'll get their numbers down. And then all of a sudden, the next time they go to get their blood work done 4 to 6 weeks later, they have higher hemoglobin and hematocrit. So there's so many things that people aren't looking at. They're looking at these short-term interventions. Hey, what can I do today to decrease it tomorrow? But they're not looking at, hey, what are the nutrient interactions between the foods that I'm taking in and the other nutrients within that meal? We have to think about this is all, it's called a food matrix. So one plays in on one another. So if you have a nutrient, just like if we have an anti-nutrient in a meal, it can either block or compete for absorption with food. So that's why I don't use a macronutrient prescription with clients. I don't just tell them, hey, hit these macros. What I'm looking at is very specific combinations of things because I know how these things cross compete with one another. And I'm very intentional about that.
So this guy, I'm pulling it up right now because I got his book. I wanted to share it with you and the listeners. Is called The Copper Revolution by Jason Hummel. And he was talking on this podcast I heard him on that this guy went up to 2,000 milligrams of copper before it blocked iron through the centroplasm side. So it's a very interesting stuff out there. But to answer your question, I've just watched what I've eaten. I pulled out a lot of fortified stuff like I was doing oatmeal, things like that. So I switched over to like Pride cream of rice, which was low in iron, and I just started
Absolutely.
going more fruit and things like that. But it was very interesting thing, and I would like to have that topic down the road. So listeners, if you guys are into some cool stuff, it's Cure Your Chronic Fatigue by Morley Robbins, and then that author I just mentioned on that. Now we have topic 3. Other factors we consider when designing a nutrition plan for a client once we discuss their maintenance intake. I just saw
You
you
want me to
pop.
start this?
Yeah, no, I just saw you pop something to be able to help that throat of yours. So yeah, fire, baby.
All right. So the first thing I'm looking to do when I'm creating a plan, first off the bat, the fundamental thing I'm doing is I'm looking to meet a client where they're at. So I'm looking over their food journal, their dietary habits, their meal times and frequency, their schedules, their
Correct.
preferences, and their goals to determine what's the right approach to use with this specific client. And this essentially allows me to build out what I call a skeleton of what the diet will look like in terms of their food sources and food swaps, the amount of meals we'll utilize per day, the timing of these nutrients. But then I'm also considering other things. So like we hit on, previously, micronutrient status. So the first thing I'm doing when, I'm asking myself when a client sends over a food journal is, do they have the vitamin and mineral cofactors needed to properly digest and make the most out of the foods they're taking in currently? Because a lot of times I see people and they have signs of deficiencies. I have someone that has signs of hypothyroidism, but they're not taking in enough selenium or iodine. They have low tyrosine in their diet. They have all these,
Yeah.
signs, and I'm saying, can I mitigate that before they go see a doctor, or before they get a prescription medication, or before they try this supplement? Can I mitigate that through nutritional therapy? And I'm not here to act as a doctor, so I want people, in the audience to really realize that. But really, what I'm trying to do is get, essentially help my clients in the best way possible. I don't just care about body composition. I'm very focused on health as well, because I do believe that that is the foundation to body composition change, especially over the long term. So that's where I'll run their diet through a software like Chronometer to see any
Mhm.
of the nutrient deficiencies they may have. And then I specifically try to address those deficiencies through the addition of certain nutrient dense foods and or supplements to fill those gaps. So this is especially important for those who come to me having just finished a fat loss phase, or those with a history of chronic dieting, because I find that many people with, kind of like our diet culture as it is, they focus so heavily on the numbers and being in a deficit and losing weight, that they're not
Yeah.
only in a calorie deficit, but they're also in a nutrient deficit. So that's often where I'll add in a multivitamin as an insurance policy, especially because of the fact you actually mentioned this briefly, that the foods we have today are so low in nutrient values that we need to make up for it. So this is where, utilizing a multi, especially at the start of a program before they've really gotten used to eating some of these nutrient dense whole foods, especially if someone has a low appetite or a low calorie intake that they can maintain at, this is where utilizing something like that is helpful. Then I'm looking at their digestive capacity and their GI health. And so if someone comes to me, this is really common. I often have guys that come to me and their goal is to, quote unquote, bulk. They want to build muscle essentially. And
40
so,
pounds in 3 weeks.
yeah, they want to get, eat big and get big. But the
Yeah.
thing is, if you have impaired digestion, I'm going to work on improving your digestion first before I ever look at increasing food. And that's why I'm a big fan of primer phases, where I essentially prime someone's internal physiology and their health
Correct.
in all aspects, from their aerobic conditioning to their digestive health to their blood glucose and insulin sensitivity, all these parameters, so that they're more primed to be responsive to those changes we make within the next phase. Another thing, and you know this very well, I'm extremely passionate about looking at someone's level of insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance and their blood sugar management. So that's where I'm having them track their blood glucose levels. I'm trying to see their responses to meals, how their energy is after meals, how they partition nutrients. Are they getting pumps in the gym, or are they someone that eats 500 grams of carbs, can't get a pump for their life, and they're just water retentive, which just shows me that there's signs of insulin resistance. I'm also looking at, and this is something that I've really paid attention to in the last couple of years, was a client's stress levels as well as their personality type. Because it's not enough to just, ask them about stress, because there's certain personality types that they are extremely stress resilient. So they can have really high levels of stress and they can tell you, listen, I run a business and a company and this, that, and the other, but they're just super resilient. They have a very high stress tolerance. But if I have someone who's super stressed and then is type A and is essentially sympathetic dominant, meaning that they're always in the state of fight or flight, that's where I'm looking at the nutrition to try to mitigate that. So I might bias more carbs in their diet to drive down their stress hormone response and their cortisol production. I'm also looking at their level of metabolic flexibility and looking at, can they run off both carbs and fat? Some people will come to me and say, I can't utilize carbs. You know what I mean? Anytime I do, I feel bloated. I have no energy. It just shows me that they have very low ability to oxidize or burn carbohydrates for energy. And often those are the people that suffer during training because they're having to run off primarily fats. And then I'm looking at their current training program. I want to see how many days per week they're training and how many days per week they can actually train, the total amount of weekly training volume, the training intensity. So are they using RRR or RP, or do they train to failure? And this is really important, because if I have two clients of the same body weight come to me, and one can only train, say, 45 minutes, 3 days per week, but the other trains for an hour and 15 minutes, 6 days per week, their total weekly calorie intakes, and specifically their carb intakes, are going to be substantially different. So what I
100%.
really try to do with the nutrition is I'm trying to match their nutrition to the metabolic demands of their training and lifestyle. So that's also where I'm looking at physical activity levels. I'm tracking steps. I'm seeing, are they an office worker? Are they a PT on the gym floor? What does their overall lifestyle look like? And so, I also, within that, I like to see, the last thing I really like to see is, I want to see what has and hasn't worked for a client previously, and also their thoughts and beliefs on different approaches, because it's not only the physiology that we have to take into context. So I just named off a bunch of categories that I go through, or a bunch of factors that I look at from a physiological perspective. How does your body respond to things? But that's not the only thing. They have, we have clients that come to us with these preset mindsets and these perspectives on things. And some people are scared of carbs, or some people, they don't like fats or whatever. And that's where we have to really give and take, and really give the client what they need, but as well as what they want, and have to take into consideration, what I try to do is I try to replace the approaches that haven't worked for them in the past with better ones. But if there's something they've really seen great results in, or they really believe in and they have buy-in in, I'm going to try to incorporate that into the plan as well.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Everything you just said, I covered, but I think it really comes down to what I said earlier, a negotiation. Like where do you want to go? What are you currently doing? And do you plan on actually negotiating and do what you need to do to get there? I like that you mentioned about the personalities. That is something that is very true. You could get a type A woman. She'll want to work out 6 days a week, where sometimes I'm like, hey, 2 to 3 days a week might just be best for you until you can get better at the sleep, better at the recovery, and things like that. Because an inflamed body is not a body that's going to give you the results you want.
I would say a healthy body is a responsive
body. That's a very good way of saying it. But be honest with you, man, beyond that, I'm dead on with you. I like to just understand like where their micronutrients are at, where they're kind of starting. Are they going to be able to do cardio? Are they going to have to do more G-Flux model? Do they have a screaming, crying kid that jumps into bed every night with them? There's really a lot that goes into it. I think that's where I like to call it deductive reasoning as a coach. You've got to start figuring out like, hey, all right, you want to go here? Well, we got to start figuring out the bullet points to get there. Now, this is something that I always ask people when I start working with them. I ask them what their past experience was like with a coach, and what they liked and what they didn't like. And usually 9 out of 10 times the answer is education. They didn't understand enough. And that's always a very interesting find that I'm able to understand, because a lot of coaches just kind of give them a plan and then don't really educate them on the why. Like, hey, you need to do these kind of things for your liver, opening up phase 1, phase 2 detoxification, because it kind of gets your adrenals going, it gets your thyroid going. And a lot of people just want to know the why. And I relate this a lot to watching like your 401k. If you watch your 401k every day, it's very depressing. But if you put forth the effort in a person that understands how it really works, like they're doing with us, and you just let the plan run and you give it your best over the course of a year, it's a pretty impressive thing to see what you build. And I usually always relate health to wealth. And a lot of people really get that from what I have found. So, but overall, me and you set things up very similar. I just think I'd take a different approach of finding out where they're at maintenance and kind of kick a deficit off to begin. And I think you kind of have a little bit more of a streamlined approach to get to maintenance, and then work titrate up or down based upon that. But overall, we collect the same data and the same stuff. It's just different approaches, how we pop it in and make it happen.
Absolutely. I always say without data, we are blind. So that's our number one role as a coach. We really do have to collect data and be able to extract information from a client in the easiest way possible for them. So, sometimes people will come to me and say, oh, I don't know if I could track all the data that I've heard you talk about on podcasts. And here's the thing, the data I can only talk about generic circumstances, or the average on podcasts. You guys don't know what I do behind the scenes. And that's another thing with Energy Flux. People think I utilize that with everyone, and I don't. And also the ways that I utilize it are very different in individual circumstances than you hear me talk about on podcasts. Because obviously I've developed certain approaches that I'm not going to speak about, because I know that people will extrapolate them out incorrectly and not utilize them correctly. And I've spent years in the trenches developing the skills I have as a coach. But also, it's also dependent on the clientele. Whatever we give to you guys here on a podcast, realize we're speaking in generalities and trying to take context into consideration, but it's always going to be different, and it's going to be dependent on the client that we're working with. And so many circumstances come into play when we are working with an individual client as compared to when we're dispelling, information on a large platform like a podcast.
I agree. Peter Drucker, the granddaddy of management, said what gets measured gets managed. And once you get a lot of people aware, because this is something I was explaining to a lot of my new coaches I work with and who get in space, I'm like, hey, man, majority of people, you have them tag that blood glucose numbers a few times. They start seeing 120s, 130s, 140s. They will legitimately get freaked out, because, everyone knows someone who has diabetes or type 2, and they just will immediately start changing their ways. So understanding, if you're a person listening to this, sometimes getting that biofeedback helps you go, holy shit, I need to put this into gear and really make some changes, because you're just building a deeper hole that you're just shoveling your way into. So I like that we have very similar stuff there. Now, the last topic, Brandon, what is the goal of the initial plan?
All right. So my goal with the initial plan is to strike a balance between a plan that I feel that's optimal for the client's goals, but also one that's practical for their lifestyle. And ultimately, I'm trying to design a plan by manipulating the nutritional principles that I laid out in terms of priorities, but I'm doing so to fit the client. And I'm there, it's based off principles, not protocols. As I always say, each client is an N of one. So they're their own experiment. And so from there, I'm going to build out this base plan. I'm going to look at these nutritional principles. I'm going to look at all the intake that the factors we consider, the nutritional principles, all these things, and I'm going to put it together and I'm going to create a base plan. And I'm going to have them follow it for consistently for at least a week. And during this time, I'm going to incorporate some forms of data tracking, like I just mentioned. Without data, we're blind. And so I want them to have some forms of monitoring. So that could be something like weighing and measuring their food to get a better understanding of nutrition and portion sizes. Some I'll have them track their nutritional intake through an app. Some I won't. Some people come to me and they have very obsessive personality traits, to be honest with you. And I
Very
know that the
neurotic,
numbers,
right?
yes, yes, absolutely. And I don't want to encourage that. That's not my job, is to guide. It's to make them better and to take the cognitive burden off of them. And so with some people, I tell them don't track anything. With some guys, I tell them don't track blood glucose because I know they suffer from the dawn phenomenon and they freak out every time they see their blood glucose being elevated. When, what's funny is I have a guy right now, he's in contest prep. When he does postprandial readings, he could have 100 grams of carbs for breakfast. He'll come back at 85. Perfect, spot on 2 hours later. But when he checks it early in the morning, he's always in the mid 90s. He suffers from the dawn phenomenon. And no matter how many times I try to express to him the fact that it's just a high cortisol response and adrenaline dumping in the morning from his alarm, from rushing in the morning, it doesn't come through to him. So I just don't have him track blood glucose because you know what? I'm looking at him weekly. I'm getting all these other assessments. I'm seeing his pumps in the gym. I see his physique. He's in a deficit. There's no doubt in my mind that he has great insulin sensitivity. So in that case, for that client, that form of data tracking is not necessary because it's causing him to be more stressed about something that should actually take stress off of him. And other things that I'm having them track is something like getting a daily weigh-in so that we can work off of weekly averages rather than that once a week weigh-in, which can easily be skewed. I'm having them track their daily fluid intake or their water intake, tracking steps. And then with some, I'll track more health markers. So I'm looking at blood glucose, or I'm looking at resting heart rate. I'm looking at blood pressure. And once they've consistently nailed the program and we've started to develop some keystone habits, then and only then will I start making adjustments and changes to the plan based on their biofeedback and their rate of progress. And this base plan, I think it's important for coaches to admit this, and I'll admit it. This base plan is the best, approximation of the needs of the individual. More times than not, I'm pretty good at nailing it, to be honest. But there's times that I'm a little bit off. And here's the thing, it doesn't really matter because I'm only going to have them run this nutrition plan for 1 to 2 weeks before making adjustments based off their check-in data and the assessment of their biofeedback. And I think it's important to touch on the fact that as a coach, I can only make appropriate adjustments to the plan to help a client see progress if they've been consistent to the plan I set for them to begin with. Because I can't know if a program is or isn't working if a client hasn't followed it consistently enough for me to be able to gauge their body's response to it. And I think this is a mistake many coaches make. As a client will come back and say, I only followed it 70%, and they'll just make changes. The coach will just make changes to make changes. And oftentimes, and I consult a lot of coaches that I they're mentees of mine, and they say, well, I feel like I'm not working if I'm not making changes. And I said, listen, you could still do work, but you could focus more on the habits. You can focus more on the behavior modification, the relationship that you build with that client, explaining to them why you have them doing certain things instead of just saying, oh, you didn't nail it this week, so I'm going to make additional changes. If they couldn't handle the initial changes off the bat, what makes you think they're going to be able to handle even more change and more chaos within the plan itself? So to me, the most important aspect of the initial program is to provide clients with a plan that they can stick to consistently, as we coaches can only get an accurate gauge of their body's response and then make proper adjustments to best suit their goals and needs when something is followed consistently. And that doesn't mean perfectly. It just means do your best to, 90% for the week, hit these certain things. You don't have to be down to the gram and be 100% accurate, but you need to do the same thing consistently for days in and days out.
I agree with you. I think that when I hear coaches who will just be like, I changed this, I changed that. I'm like, but if they're not even being consistent, you're just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks.
Team was 6.
Yeah. So for me, I have found I had a person call me once like, why am I paying you if you don't make changes? I'm like, do you pay me for the promise that you're trying to keep to yourself, which is to get healthy, and you're not being healthy if you're not getting to those numbers because you're still chronically under eating, and then people kind of like, oh yeah, good point. So I think, if you're a coach listening, the big takeaway is stand your ground and hold that they're paying you to hold them accountable to the plan that you want to give them based upon their goals. And if you're a client or potential consumer hearing this, you're only as good as the execution of the plan given to you for decent, like Brandon said, consistent amount of time. You can do good 1 week, shit the bed the next. Well, guess what? I can't change the plan more likely because that 1 week just undid the good work you did the week before. And it's a seesaw effect.
Nothing works unless you do.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So I think for you, my biggest thing is getting clients to get momentum, the initial plan, get them a few habits I focus on. I'm real big on a power list, like W's and L's. So I usually pick 3 things that they do for like, a month straight, like steps, breath work, a workout, or hit their nutrition, something like that. Some things that they can say like, these 3 things are hard for me. Cause some clients be like, hey, I can hit my steps every day. Okay, well then don't make that a priority, but I have a real hard time getting my 5 meals in. Okay, well then we need to make that a priority. So when you have to circle a W and L, I found this was very interesting psychology because it really forces you to question, are you a winner or a loser? And a lot of people don't like to face that down with themselves. So at which point they'll go, oh, well, you're right. I should be doing things a little bit better to make that happen. So I think we both have the same idea on it. We're just trying to say, hey, you have to, in order to be successful, follow this plan. So out of the gate, it's setting them up for success. I think we got that one out pretty good on that.
Yeah. You know what I was looking for at my desk was I have a power list. When Andy Frisella first released it, I did the entire thing. I have a document out of it. I can't find it right now, but I do think it's a really important thing. I do focus very heavily on habit change and behavior modification within my clients because ultimately it doesn't matter what the plan is. If you cannot change your habits and your behaviors over time, if you nail something for 8 to 12 weeks and you get this great transformation, great. But if you're going to resort back to your old habits and the things that held you back in the past, that means nothing. And that's why I always tell when people come to me, I say, first of all, you are committing to me for at least 3 months because that's the least amount of time that I work with someone.
100%.
And generally my current retention is a little bit under 12 months. So everyone I've worked with up until this point has been on, 11 and a half, 12 months. And I always tell people, and I'll tell this to clients, and I'll be, very honest and transparent about this. I don't give a fuck what someone can do in 12 weeks, from a client perspective, as well as a coach. That does not show me anything. What you could stick to for 8 to 12 weeks isn't a sign of long-term goal achievement. Yes, am I, proud of clients that make 12-week transformations? Absolutely. But really, I'm looking long-term. I'm trying to really help them not only transform their physiques, but transform their lives. So I'm looking long-term with these clients because I don't want someone to just work with me for 3 months and then revert back to the lifestyle that led them to contacting me in the first place. So it really does come down to really focusing on those key habits, especially in the beginning, and really cementing them first before we start making all these fancy adjustments and getting into the nuances. And a lot of people know me for being really detail oriented, and I am, don't get me wrong. Like my programs, I sent over a program to a client last night and he's a more advanced trainee. It was 28 pages long. This was a very in-depth, it took me, the entire weekend to work on. However, that was because that's at the level that this individual needs. And based on his goals, that's the amount of, attention, time, and nuance that we had to dive into. But if you haven't mastered the basics, don't get lost, don't miss the forest for the trees, don't miss out on the, don't miss the majors for the minutia, you know what I mean? So really when it comes down to it, guys, take the information that we provided with you guys with this week, use it as a foundation, and just let it build something that you could work off of going forward.
Yeah. Dude, I think that was a good wrap for this week, man. We got 4 key points for everybody. I think we got really deep into all that. We explained how we do things, understanding that calorie calculators have nuances to them, just like blood sugar monitors have 20% error rates, just like food labels do, etc. So I think we're going
to do a full podcast on the food errors to track.
Yeah,
errors,
no, we got
something that there's more data on that than we could ever go through in an offshoot, or me and you get down these alleyways sometimes on these podcasts. And it's like we got to come back to the topic, because if not, we'll be down another hour. But that's something we could definitely do a full series on. 100%.
So next week we have Lauren Conling joining us. So she's done some research out of University of South Florida with Dr. Bill Campbell. So we're going to have her on as our expert to be able to talk about the differences in dieting, how maybe they set up maintenance calories, how they figured out deficits. Did they use calorie calculators? Did they use activity trackers? What her thoughts are, how she does it, because she has a really successful brand, Team Loco Fit. So we'll be welcoming her on next week. But guys, if you have anything for us, please be sure to engage with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Tag us and stuff. Feel free to ask us questions. That's the only way that we'll know where to go. And then don't forget, we have Lauren on, but the following week we'll be announcing when we're going to be doing a live Zoom. And I will put the link along with Brandon in our stories so you guys can tag into the Zoom link. And we'll be doing a live Q&A, and it'll be on Tuesday evenings. We'll get all that time out to you guys and go accordingly. But Brandon, where can everybody find you at, man, and follow you? And I'll go, and then we'll say goodbye and kiss and make a kiss before next week.
All right, guys, feel free to reach out to me at @BrandonDeCruz_. And if you guys have any email inquiries or anything of that sort, feel free to reach out to me at bdecruzfitness@gmail.com.
Sweet guys. Y'all can find me, Jeff Unbreakable Black, on Instagram. And I am Jeff@relentlessforever.com for any email queries or things like that. Brandon, dude, as always, it's nice to chat with you. It's nice to spit education. It's nice to learn with you for this week again, man. So thank you for your time. I look forward to next week with Lauren.
Oh yeah, man. Can't wait for it. Thank you again.
Awesome, man. Have a great day.
Later.